Some places feel beautiful. Tasmania feels different. It feels distant, wild, almost untouched by the noise of the modern world. An island south of mainland Australia, small on a map. But once you're here, it feels much bigger than that. You come for the famous views. The beaches, the mountains, the wildlife. But Tasmania doesn't stay on the surface for long. It gets into your senses. You feel it in the cold air on your skin, in the sound of waves hitting black cliffs, in the silence of the forest, in the slow shift of light over water, stone, and mountain. And before you realize it, this place stops feeling like a destination. It starts feeling like an experience you carry with you. Tasmania is one of those rare places that still feels discovered, even when it's already known. And the deeper you go, the more surprising it becomes. Hobart is where that feeling begins. At first, it seems gentle. A harbor city, historic buildings, fishing boats, cafes, a relaxed waterfront, but then you notice what gives this city its character. The old sandstone, the steep streets, the warehouse facades, the feeling that history never fully disappeared here. Hobart began as a remote colonial outpost. That past still lingers in the city's shape, in its buildings, in its atmosphere. But today, the energy feels completely different, creative, lived in, confident without trying too hard. You walk through Salamanca Place and the city feels alive. People sitting outside with coffee, local markets, art galleries, restaurants serving produce from just down the road or straight from the sea. Tasmania is not just a place you look at. It's a place people live deeply in. And above Hobart, always watching, is Kunanyi. The mountain changes everything. You see it from almost every part of the city, sometimes sharp and clear, sometimes wrapped in cloud, sometimes covered with a light dusting of snow. And when you drive up, the city falls away behind you. The air gets colder, the trees close in, the wind gets stronger. Then you step out at the summit, and suddenly you're standing above it all. Below your feet, Hobart stretches toward the water. The Derwent River shines in the distance. The harbor curves into the landscape. The island begins to open around you. But it's not just the view that stays with you. It's the feeling. Up here, the wind hits harder. The air feels cleaner. Your thoughts feel quieter. For a moment, everything unnecessary falls away. And that's one of Tasmania's quiet gifts. It gives you perspective. Then everything changes. Because Tasmania is not only about landscapes and history, it also knows how to surprise you. Mona is proof of that. A museum that feels bold, strange, provocative, and completely unlike what most people expect to find on an island this remote. You arrive by boat, you move underground into galleries carved into stone, and suddenly Tasmania feels less like a frontier and more like a place that reinvents itself on its own terms. Mona is not here to comfort you. It challenges you, sometimes unsettles you, sometimes makes you laugh, sometimes leaves you wondering what exactly you just experienced. And that's the point. Tasmania refuses to stay simple. Just when you think it's all wilderness and nostalgia, it reveals another side. And this is where the story shifts. Because not far from Hobart lies one of the most important places on the island, Port Arthur. It's beautiful when you first see it. Too beautiful, almost. Still water, green grass, old stone ruins, a peaceful setting by the sea. And that beauty makes the truth hit even harder. This was once one of the harshest convict settlements in the British Empire. A place built for punishment, for exile, for isolation. You walk through the ruins and feel the contrast instantly. The landscape is calm. The history is not. Here, distance was part of the sentence. The sea was part of the barrier. The island itself became part of the prison. And standing there, you feel something Tasmania does better than almost anywhere else. It makes beauty and darkness exist in the same frame. Nothing is flat here. Nothing is only one thing. Then you leave the ruins behind, and the peninsula takes over. The cliffs rise higher. The wind grows stronger. The ocean becomes louder. This coastline doesn't feel gentle. It feels immense. At Cape Howe, Cape Pillar, and Cape Raoul, the land drops away into the Southern Ocean in giant walls of rock. Dark columns plunge into restless water. Sea stacks rise offshore like broken towers. You stand there facing the edge, and the scale rewrites your sense of distance. Under your feet, the ground feels solid. In front of you, the sea feels endless. Around you, everything sounds alive. You hear the wind. You hear the surf exploding against stone. You hear the kind of silence that only exists inside huge landscapes. This is not soft beauty. This is Tasmania, with all the softness removed. And then, just when the island reaches maximum intensity, it pulls back. At tessellated pavement, the drama becomes precise. The shoreline looks almost designed. Flat rock divided into geometric blocks, like ancient stonework laid out by some impossible hand. There are no giant peaks here, no theatrical drop. And still, you stop. Because Tasmania knows how to create wonder in different ways. Sometimes through scale, sometimes through detail, sometimes through force, sometimes through stillness. Then comes one of the island's most iconic places, Freycinet. And this is where Tasmania almost looks unreal. Granite peaks, white sand, blue water so clear it seems lit from below. Then you reach the lookout above Wineglass Bay, and there it is. That perfect curve of bright sand held between forest and sea. You don't just see it, you pause, because some landscapes don't ask for words, they ask for surrender. And yet, even here, there is something deeper than beauty. That's the Tasmanian pattern. Behind the postcard, there is always another layer. History, memory, distance, a sense that this place has lived many different lives. Still, Freycinet is one of those places that makes people dream. You can feel why. The light feels cleaner here. The air feels sharper. The whole landscape seems drawn with more precision. And this is where a lot of travelers start to understand Tasmania's real power. It isn't only impressive, it is immersive. You don't just visit it, you step into it. Then the pace softens. Because Tasmania is not only cliffs and mountain lookouts, it is also taste, texture, routine, the small rituals of life on the island. And this part matters. Because the dream of Tasmania is not only what you see in a wide shot, it's also what arrives at the table. Fresh oysters, cold climate wines, salmon, scallops, cheeses, apples, berries, honey, whiskey. The food here feels connected to the land and the sea in a very direct way. Nothing feels random. The island's size helps with that. Things feel close to their origin, close to the weather that shaped them, close to the water they came from, and that changes the experience. A meal here doesn't just taste good. It tastes local in the real sense of the word. That slower rhythm is part of Tasmania too. People linger, they look outside, they talk, they take their time, and the island rewards that. Then everything goes quieter again. Maria Island. No cars, no rush. Just open space, old ruins, sea air, and wildlife moving as if the place belongs entirely to them. And maybe it does. You arrive and the world seems to lower its voice. You hear your footsteps, you hear birds, you hear the wind moving through grass. Then you see a wombat, not staged, not distant, just there, calm, heavy, completely at home. Maria Island feels like the world after human noise has faded. And that's what makes it so special. The island still carries traces of history. Old buildings, old structures, old reminders. But now the emotional center belongs to nature. The painted cliffs glow in orange and gold. The shoreline bends into silence. Wildlife moves through former human spaces without ceremony. Here, Tasmania feels less like a destination and more like a gentle revelation. And then the island reminds you that its wildlife is not a side note. It is part of the identity. A wallaby at dusk, an echidna moving through the undergrowth, little penguins returning to shore, bird life circling above wetlands and coastlines, and then, of course, the Tasmanian devil. It may look smaller than the legend suggests, but then you hear it, then you see it move, then you understand there is something fierce in this animal that has nothing to do with size. It feels ancient, defensive, raw, completely uninterested in appearing charming. That's what makes it unforgettable. The Tasmanian devil is not a mascot. It is a reminder. Wildness is not always beautiful in a gentle way. Sometimes it is rough. Sometimes it is loud. Sometimes it shows its teeth. And then there is the shadow that never fully leaves Tasmania. The thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger. Officially extinct, still somehow present in the island's imagination. People still talk about it, still hope, still leave a small space open for mystery. That may sound irrational, but in Tasmania, mystery feels natural. This is an island where the improbable doesn't feel impossible, and that feeling follows you inland, toward Cradle Mountain. This is one of the defining images of Tasmania. The mountain rising above Dove Lake, dark water in the foreground, jagged ridge lines behind it, cloud moving low across the summit. It is one of those rare places that looks iconic and still feels personal when you arrive. The air is colder here. The silence is deeper. The landscape feels stripped back to the essentials. Rock, water, sky, wind. You hear boots on the path. You hear water tapping the edge of the shore. You hear the wind threading through the alpine grass, and if the mountain reveals itself clearly, the moment lands with full force. If it stays hidden in cloud, it still works. Because Cradle Mountain does not need perfect weather. It becomes more powerful when conditions shift. That's true of so much in Tasmania. This island doesn't lose its beauty in uncertainty. It gains atmosphere. Nearby, the highlands stretch out in a different mood. Open water, cold air, long distances, a quieter kind of awe. At Lake St. Clair, everything feels more internal, less dramatic on the surface. More contemplative underneath. You stand by the water and the whole landscape seems distilled. Nothing extra, nothing exaggerated. Just stillness, shape, and light. And somewhere in streams like these, the platypus moves through icy water like a creature invented by rumor. That's another Tasmanian feeling. The unbelievable, casually existing. Then the island deepens again. The west, the forest thickens. The air grows wetter. The light turns softer beneath the canopy. You enter rainforest and the atmosphere changes immediately. Tree ferns unfurl like something prehistoric. Moss thickens on stone and fallen trunks. Water seems to move through everything. At Russell Falls, the scene feels almost impossibly composed. Water dropping in pale ribbons, green everywhere, cool air against your skin. It feels ancient. And the deeper you go into Western Tasmania, the stronger that feeling becomes. This is one of the last places where the natural world still feels older than human ambition. The roads narrow, the forest closes in, time seems to slow, and then Tasmania does what it does best. It breaks the rhythm. Because in the middle of all this wilderness stands Gordon Dam. Massive, curved, concrete, human will made visible on a giant scale. You walk across it and feel both awe and discomfort. It's impressive. It's severe. It doesn't blend in, and that contrast matters. Tasmania is not some untouched fantasy. It is a real place, with tension, with decisions, with competing ideas about land, power, preservation, and progress. That complexity gives the island depth. Then comes one of the greatest visual surprises of all, the Bay of Fires. White sand, clear turquoise water, and boulders glowing bright orange as if they've stored sunlight inside them for centuries. It looks almost too vivid to trust, but it's real. And when you stand there, the color contrast is so intense that the whole coastline feels like a dream built from 3 impossible shades. White, blue, orange. This is where Tasmania gives you one of those moments every traveler remembers. A moment when the world looks even better than it did in your imagination, and that is rare. Then the mood changes again. In the north, the island softens. Rolling farmland, historic towns, vineyards, fields stretching under broad skies. Launceston brings another texture to Tasmania, less dramatic at first glance, more lived in, more intimate. Then, right beside the city, Cataract Gorge opens like a geological interruption. Cliffs, river, walking tracks, a sudden eruption of nature where you least expect it. That is Tasmania all over again. It never keeps things in separate boxes. City and wilderness, history and reinvention, comfort and rawness. They all keep meeting. The farther you travel, the more you notice something else. Tasmania is not only memorable in the big moments, it lives in the in-between. A winding road at the end of the day, a bakery in a quiet town, a cellar door in the cold, a conversation with someone who has built a life on this island and cannot imagine leaving it. Those moments matter because they give Tasmania texture. Then the island rises again. Stanley, and above it, the Nut, a giant volcanic plug lifting straight out of the landscape like a fortress left behind by another age. You look at the town below, you look at that towering mass above it, and the contrast is immediate. Tasmania has a gift for visual drama. A harbor below a mountain, a beach below granite peaks, a town below a volcanic wall. This island understands the power of a silhouette. Then there's Bruny Island, an island off an island. Even that sounds like the beginning of a story. You cross by ferry, the mainland slips behind you. The mood shifts. At the neck, a narrow ribbon of sand connects land between two vast bodies of water. You stand there in the wind and look both ways. Ocean on one side, sea on the other, sky everywhere. You feel exposed. You feel awake. You feel exactly where you are. And that's not something every destination gives you anymore. Bruny is also Tasmania in miniature, wild coastlines, great food, quiet roads, sea air, a sense that life here still follows nature more than the clock. Then there's another part of the story, one that isn't always loud, but still matters. Religion is not the defining force of Tasmania for most visitors. You will see churches. You will see traces of Christian history in older towns and colonial settlements. But Tasmania doesn't feel primarily shaped by public religion in the present tense. If anything, what feels sacred here is the landscape itself. The mountain above the city, the silence of the forest of the sea, the stillness of highland lakes, the presence of places that hold memory deeper than tourism ever could. And that includes the long history of the Palawa people. Tasmania was known, lived, navigated, and understood long before colonization. That truth matters. Because it changes how you see the island. Not as empty, not as newly discovered, but as a place layered with older meanings, older belonging, older memory. One of the greatest pleasures in Tasmania is simply moving through it. Driving here feels like part of the journey, not just a way between stops. The road curves through farmland, then forest, then coast, then a town, then mist, then sunlight breaking through. The island keeps changing. And because the distances are manageable, the variety never stops feeling exciting. That's one of the reasons Tasmania works so well as a travel dream. It feels vast emotionally, but accessible physically. You can move from harbor city to mountain summit, from convict history to white sand beaches, from rainforest to fine dining, from wildlife encounters to quiet rural roads, all within a journey that never feels impossible. And through all of it, the weather remains part of the story. Not background, character. The wind changes the mood of a cliff. The fog changes the shape of a mountain. The rain deepens the forest. The cold sharpens the coast. Tasmania does not always give you perfect conditions. It gives you atmosphere, and atmosphere is often more powerful. That's why people remember this island, not only because of what they saw, but because of what they felt while they were there. The cold at the summit, the salt in the air, the hush of the forest, the sound of distant surf, the glow of evening on sandstone, the sight of an animal emerging from the edge of the frame. Tasmania stays with you because it doesn't feel over-explained. It still leaves room for weather, room for silence, room for wonder, room for your own thoughts. You come for the famous places. Hobart, Port Arthur, Freycinet, Cradle Mountain, Bay of Fires, Bruny Island, Maria Island. But what changes you is harder to name. It's the feeling of standing somewhere that still has mystery. Somewhere that still has texture. Somewhere that still feels like itself. And maybe that's what makes Tasmania so rare now. It doesn't ask to be consumed. It asks to be noticed. Maybe that's the real luxury now. Not just seeing another beautiful place, but finding one that still feels alive enough to surprise you. So now tell me, do you still see Tasmania as just a beautiful island at the bottom of Australia? Or does it feel like one of those places you need to experience for yourself? If this journey transported you, subscribe for more unforgettable places around the world. Like the video and leave a comment telling me which part of Tasmania you'd want to see first, because some places look incredible on screen. And some places quietly change the way you see the world. Tasmania might be one of them.